You wake up to a sharp, acrid smell in the air, your throat already scratchy from the burning, smoky scent that lingers like a predator waiting for you to realize it's already too late. It's 1666, and London is beginning to burn. The fire starts innocently enough, a spark in a baker's oven. Maybe it's just a flicker at first, something so small you'd never believe it could spread so quickly, devour so completely. But it does. It always does. And now, it's on its way to devouring you. Outside, you can hear the growing chaos, a low, terrified murmur, like a distant rumble of thunder before a storm. The air is too thick to breathe, and when you open your window, the skyline is already dimmed by a haze, thick and suffocating. You're not even sure whether it's the night or the smoke that makes everything so dark. You move into the streets, the pavement hot underfoot, the flickering glow of flames reflecting off the wet stones, now slick with oil, and the early signs of panic. It's in the eyes of the people running by, pushing past you. The first scream you hear sounds like someone who's just learned that survival isn't certain. The fire has a mind of its own, and it's spreading faster than anyone ever anticipated. You probably won't survive this. Sorry to break it to you this early, but when disaster strikes this fast, no one escapes unharmed. You're just one of many who will never make it out, and it's already too late to change that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so leave me a comment with your location and local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fire's already begun, and you can feel it coming closer. London in 1666 was a tinderbox waiting to be set alight. The city you're stumbling through, eyes squinting against the thick smoke, is a labyrinth of narrow, winding streets. It's packed, crammed to the edge, with tightly clustered buildings that look like they're on the verge of collapsing into each other. No, they're not built to last, not even close. You're living in a city made entirely of timber, the walls thin and the roof lines slanted in such a way that any flame, no matter how small, could reach the next house, then the next, and then the entire block. And that's exactly what happens. You might think that the city should have known better. London is old, nearly 2,000 years old. Surely they should have prepared for something as obvious as fire. But the truth is, no one thought it would happen this way. There were laws about fire safety, yes, but who enforces laws in a city like this? Nobody. Wood is cheap, and timber frames are quick to erect, especially with the boom in population. The city is rapidly expanding, and there's no time to waste on brick. When fire comes, the structures only need minutes to catch and spread, with barely a chance for escape. As you stumble past the buildings, some already beginning to collapse from the flames' hunger, you realize something. There's no real system in place to stop this. No buckets of water stored anywhere near enough. The fire engines, laughable relics, can barely manage to put out a small candle flame. You're in a disaster zone where even the fire brigades are little more than bystanders, watching helpless as the city eats itself alive. Historians still argue whether the lack of fire safety measures was due to negligence or simple ignorance. Either way, it doesn't matter now, because the fire is already here, and it's only a matter of time before it reaches you. Every moment feels heavier as the inferno pushes onward, hungrily devouring everything in its path. The city's very design has turned against you, a fatal flaw built into every wall, every alleyway. You can hear the shrieks of terror in the distance, but no one's moving fast enough. The people who could escape, the wealthy, are already gone, having packed their bags, taken their valuables, and fled to their countryside estates. The rest, they're trapped, helpless, as the fire eats away at their future. You try to move faster, but there's no escape. You've been caught in the city's death trap. You weren't supposed to survive this, not when everything around you was built to burn. The fire doesn't wait for you to gather your thoughts. It's already here, and it's moving faster than anyone expected. By the time you realize what's happening, the flames have jumped from one building to the next, cascading like a wave, swallowing entire blocks in mere moments. You can see it now, the orange glow, the flickering tongues of fire, reaching for the sky as the wind fans them on, pushing them further, faster. It's like something out of a nightmare, except you can't wake up from this one. There's no escape. People are running, their faces twisted with fear, some shouting, some crying, some just staring. You can barely move through the crowded streets. The panic is contagious, and it's spreading as fast as the fire itself. But no matter how fast you run, no matter how hard you push through the frantic crowd, the smoke is choking you. It stings your eyes and burns your lungs. You try to shout for someone to help, but your voice is lost in the roar of the flames. You realize with a sickening certainty that everyone around you is in the same boat. No one's getting out of here unscathed. You glance back, hoping for some miracle, but there is none. The fire is taking over. The wind shifts, and the flames surge forward again, consuming everything in their path. As you try to move away from the heat, you realize just how little control you have. This isn't something that can be outrun. This fire is smarter than you. It follows the wind, the narrowest alleys, every crack, every gap. There's no place to hide. Historians argue about the speed at which the fire spread. Some say it was the wind that caused the devastation. Others blame the fuel-rich structures. In reality, it doesn't matter. Once the fire has a hold, it's unstoppable. It doesn't care who you are, what you've done, or where you're going. The fire is a beast with an insatiable hunger. It doesn't think, it doesn't feel, it just destroys. And yet, here you are, a witness, a part of the carnage. As the fire spreads, it becomes painfully clear. Survival isn't just about running faster than the flames. It's about sheer luck. You push forward, but you know deep down that no one escapes this. Not all of you will make it out. The city is dying, and so is your chance of survival. The fire moves like a predator, and you're just a small, terrified prey. As you try to keep your bearing, you're struck by a harsh truth. This fire isn't just consuming buildings, it's consuming the very idea of safety. It doesn't care who you are, not your wealth, not your position. The fire isn't some random force of nature. It's an equalizer. It tears through the rich and poor alike, sweeping over everyone, no matter how much they think they've prepared. You've seen the wealthy fleeing, their chests heaving with panic, their carriages filled with valuables, but their faces are just as full of terror as the poor souls trapped in the burning streets. Money doesn't buy safety when the fire moves this fast, and when the city is built to burn. There's a sickening irony to it, isn't there? The poor are desperate, yes, but they're not the only ones in danger. The nobles, the merchants, the leaders, all of them are realizing that their wealth and status mean nothing in the face of this calamity. You can't buy your way out of a fire that consumes everything. And now, the streets are a mess of frantic chaos as the wealthy try to find escape, just like everyone else. You don't have time to dwell on their misfortune, though. The fire is relentless, chasing you down with its roaring heat, forcing you to keep running. You feel like you've lost your sense of time. Everything is chaotic. The crackling flames, the screams, the sudden thuds as buildings collapse into themselves. People stumble past you, faces masked with terror, trying to find shelter, trying to outrun what is already overtaking them. Historians still debate how London's class divisions influenced the aftermath of the fire. Did the rich recover faster than the poor? Yes, but for all their money, the trauma still lingers. They returned to rebuild homes, but the cost was personal. They couldn't outrun the fire, and they couldn't outrun what it had done to them either. The sound of glass shattering in the distance pulls you out of your thoughts. Another building, another set of lives crushed under the weight of flames. You can't even imagine what the people trapped inside must be feeling right now. Helplessness, fear, a sense of inevitable doom. But no one is safe. Not you, not them, not anyone. You keep running, but there's no place to go. The city, the very streets you've walked for years, are now alien, hostile. The fire spreads like a living thing, insidious, creeping into every corner. It doesn't stop until everything is gone. No one is safe. The fire doesn't care who you are. You push yourself harder, the heat of the flames gnawing at your skin, the choking smoke stinging your lung with every shallow breath you take. There's no thought now, just survival. Your body moves on instinct. You dodge past other desperate souls, some pushing forward, others stumbling, collapsing, giving up entirely. Their eyes are wide with fear, their faces twisted in agony as they realize just how small they are in comparison to the fury of nature. There's nothing comforting in this flight. The path ahead is unclear. The streets are too narrow, and the air is too thick to see beyond the nearest flame. Your heart races, but not from exertion, from the terror that this is it. No one can outrun fire, and no one can hide from it. You wish you could turn back, wish you could have prepared better, but there's no time for regrets now. The smell of burning wood, leather, and tar fills your nostrils. Your clothes stick to your skin with the sweat of panic. Your eyes sting, but you force yourself to blink through the haze. You keep running, your legs aching, your feet slapping against the stone roads. The buildings that were once your home are now towering infernos, towering in judgment over the terrified masses that scramble below them. In the distance, you hear the scream of a woman, her cry rising above the sounds of the fire. She doesn't know it, but her fate was sealed the moment the flames spread to her building. You glance up to see the dark silhouette of a building crumble, its frame too weak to withstand the intensity of the fire. It's another life lost, another story erased by the insatiable hunger of the flames. Historians argue whether the death toll of the Great Fire was truly as high as people claimed. Some say it's impossible to know, since so many bodies were lost to the fire and the debris. What's clear, though, is this: survival wasn't just about being in the right place at the right time. It was about luck, who had it and who didn't. A sharp pain sears through your chest, and you realize you've been holding your breath too long. You gasp for air, but the smoke fills your lungs once more. You cough, choking, the panic seizing tighter around your chest. But you can't stop. You have to keep moving. You glance to your right, and you see it, the promise of escape, a narrow alley, perhaps a chance, perhaps your salvation. You push toward it, but as you do, the fire shifts its focus, feeding on the wind, moving faster than you can follow. There's no place safe. You know it now. No matter how hard you try, no matter how fast you run, the fire has already claimed you. As the sun sets, the fire shows no sign of slowing. The flames have already eaten through entire districts, and you know, deep down, that by morning, this city, this London you once knew, will be nothing but ash. The air is thick with it now, the smoke darkening the skies, blanketing the city in an ominous, choking gloom. You can taste the ash on your tongue, feel it settling on your skin, a grim reminder of the devastation unfolding. The streets, once full of life and the hum of commerce, are eerily quiet now, except for the occasional scream or shout in the distance. You try to make sense of it all, but nothing about this makes sense. The city you've walked for years, the landmarks you've passed 1,000 times, are now foreign. The buildings that were once proud symbols of London's heart are now nothing more than collapsing husks, their former lives swallowed by the insatiable flames. It's overwhelming, isn't it? The scale of destruction. You've witnessed it in real time, the swift annihilation of a whole world. You don't know who's gone and who's still fighting for their lives, but you do know this. By the time the fire dies down, many will have been lost, their fate sealed by an unstoppable force. What you're experiencing isn't just the death of buildings, it's the death of a city. The emotional weight of that loss hangs heavy in the air, as thick as the smoke that now fills your lungs. As you wander through the remains, you see others like you, survivors, lost in the ruins, searching for something, anything. Some look for family members, others for their belongings, but no one seems to have the strength to hope anymore. There's nothing left to salvage. It's as though the fire has erased everything. The future is just as uncertain as the ground beneath your feet. Nothing is safe. Nothing is permanent. The survivors are left to roam through the wreckage, empty-handed. They can't even cry out. They can't even mourn properly, not with the flames still licking at their heels, the city's life still burning before their eyes. What good is survival when the city you loved has been wiped off the map? You realize the fire's true cost now. It's not just the destruction of homes, but the destruction of the very identity of this city. London is no longer London. It's a memory, an ash-laden ghost of what it used to be. Historians still argue over the number of deaths caused by the fire. But one thing is clear: the emotional toll, the psychological cost, is harder to measure. Some survivors never returned to the city after the fire. London would never be the same, not just physically, but spiritually. The heart of the city had been torn apart, and it would take more than bricks and mortar to rebuild what was lost. You stand there in the middle of the devastation and realize that survival, your survival, means nothing if there's nothing left to survive for. What happens when everything you knew is reduced to ashes? As the fire continues to rage, you find yourself still moving through the ruins. Your feet shuffle across the cobbled streets, now cracked and scorched, your thoughts drifting as you try to make sense of it all. You don't even know what's worse anymore: the endless flames that still burn, or the stillness that follows them, the weight of what's been lost. The smoke fills your lungs, and every breath is a painful reminder that the destruction hasn't stopped. But in this strange, surreal quiet, a thought begins to creep in. How did it all come to this? The fire, of course, didn't just happen out of nowhere. It started with a single spark in a bakery. Just a careless accident. Some say an ordinary mistake. But what is ordinary about a city designed to burn? A city where, despite warnings and past fires, buildings were built of timber, stacked too close together, with no real plan for how to stop the flames if they ever spread. You begin to wonder, was this inevitable? Was the fire bound to come sooner or later, given how poorly prepared the city was? Historians still argue about that very question. Was the disaster an inevitable outcome of bad planning? Or was it just sheer bad luck, fluke of fate, that ignited one of the largest fires in history? Some believe that the fire was exacerbated by the fact that people didn't learn from past mistakes, that they allowed the city to grow too quickly without considering the safety of its structures. Others argue that it was the city's rapid growth that made it impossible to foresee such a catastrophe. Either way, as you walk through the ashes of what was once a thriving, bustling metropolis, you realize that there's something fundamentally wrong with how people viewed the city. They lived with this sense of invulnerability, as though nothing could touch them. But when the fire came, it tore through that sense of safety, exposing just how fragile the world really is. It's sobering to think about, isn't it? How easily it all crumbled. You, standing here now, witness to the wreckage, you're reminded of how quickly things can slip away. What do we really control in this life? How much of our fate is governed by the decisions we make, and how much is shaped by circumstances beyond our control? As you continue through the city, you realize that the fire wasn't just a physical event. It was a force of reckoning, stripping away illusions, exposing vulnerabilities, and reminding you that survival is never guaranteed. What happens when the foundation of your existence, the very city that sustains you, turns into dust and smoke? The city of London will rebuild. It has no other choice. But for you, for the people you've seen running past, for everyone whose home was reduced to ashes, there will never be the same sense of security. London was a reminder, a lesson in vulnerability, one that you and the survivors will carry for the rest of your lives. The night stretches on, the fire still flickering in the distance, but you're no longer running. You've slowed down, exhausted, your legs heavy, your heart even heavier. The city around you is almost unrecognizable now, a ghost town in the making. The sounds of destruction are replaced by the eerie silence of desolation. It feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable dawn that will reveal the true scale of the devastation. The worst part? It's not over yet. The fire still rages on, and you know you're not safe. But somehow, you find yourself standing still, lost in your thoughts. You look around, seeing other survivors scattered about. Some are huddled together. Others are still wandering aimlessly, eyes wide with disbelief. Some, like you, seem paralyzed, unsure of what comes next. The streets are quieter now, as though the flames have stolen not just lives, but any semblance of hope too. You wonder how many will truly survive this, not just the fire, but the aftermath. You begin to realize something. Surviving the fire may be the easy part. The hardest part will come later. What happens to those who survive? What kind of life do they have now? You think about the people who lost everything, their families, their homes, their lives, and you wonder, Can you really call yourself a survivor when everything you once knew has burned to the ground? Some of the survivors you see are still in shock, unable to even comprehend the extent of the loss. Others have begun searching for their loved ones, but their faces are empty of hope, just desperate longing. You've heard the stories before about the psychological toll that surviving a tragedy can take. Survivor's guilt. It's a common thing. You've never thought much about it until now. But as you stand here, staring at the wreckage of London, you can feel the weight of it creeping in. Why did you survive when so many didn't? What makes you so special? And what about the others? Those who didn't make it? How do you live with that? Historians often overlook the emotional toll that events like this have on the survivors. We're quick to look at the numbers, the physical damage, but the scars that are left on the mind, the guilt, the sense of shame, those are often left unspoken. But they're real as the fire itself. Some survivors will spend the rest of their lives grappling with the question of why they lived when others died. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about carrying the weight of those you couldn't save. It's a burden that lasts long after the flames have gone out. The flames eventually subside. It's hard to believe they ever really existed, as if they were just a fever dream, a nightmare that ravaged your waking hours. But when the fire finally dies, the city is left in pieces, its heart reduced to a pile of smoldering wreckage. The survivors begin to pick through what's left, salvaging what they can, finding their way through the ruins. For some, the next few days are spent trying to find what they've lost: family members, keepsakes, anything that might make them feel like they're still connected to the world that was. But for many, it's even worse. There is nothing left to salvage. They are left with nothing but their lives. And even those feel fragile. The city, too, begins to rebuild. The government, eager to restore some sense of order, promises to restore London to its former glory. New plans are drawn up, and soon construction begins in earnest. Buildings rise from the ash. New streets are carved out, and slowly life begins to return to the city. But as you walk through the early stages of the rebuilding effort, something feels off. Something is missing. You see the grand designs, wider streets, sturdier buildings made of stone and brick instead of the flammable wood that once dominated London's skyline. But these changes, while practical, come with a cost. The old London is gone. Its streets, its soul, its memories, all buried beneath layers, fresh mortar and stone. The fire, in its wake, has not only destroyed the physical city, but it has erased part of what made it unique. Historians still debate whether the fire was a blessing in disguise for London's future. The city was in dire need of reform, but at what cost? Was this destruction worth the progress? Many would argue that the fire gave the city a chance to evolve, to become something more modern, more sophisticated. But what of the history it burned? What of the stories that died with the flames? The survivors will never forget, but will future generations ever truly understand the cost of rebuilding? You begin to wonder if the rebuilding was even really about progress, or if it was more about forgetting the trauma, forgetting the lives lost, forgetting that this city was built on the ashes of so many dreams. In the rush to rebuild, something essential was lost: the emotional scars of the fire. The memories of those who didn't survive became something to be buried, swept under the rug. Life goes on, yes, but it's different now. London is different now. As you move through the ruins, you realize something unsettling. The fire may have burned the city, but the rebuilding is burning something else. The memories, the grief, the truth, and perhaps in the rush to rebuild London and its people may have been rebuilding the wrong things. You stand amidst the rebuilding efforts, but your mind keeps drifting back to the people who were here before, those whose names will never be known. You try to imagine them, but it's hard. After all, who really remembers the poor, the unimportant, the forgotten? In a disaster of this scale, it's easy to overlook those who didn't matter to history. They were the ones who couldn't flee, who couldn't escape the flames, the ones left behind. Their names won't be found in history books, and their fates won't be memorialized. To most, they're ghosts, faceless, nameless victims of something they had no control over. As the rebuilding progresses, the focus shifts, of course. The rich and powerful are the ones who get to decide what to remember and how to remember it. The monuments that spring up in the city's heart celebrate the well-known, the heroes, the survivors who made it out. But what of those who were simply left behind? The poor, the elderly, the children. Their stories vanish into the smoke. History remembers only those who were lucky enough to escape, those who could rebuild their lives in the wake of tragedy. Historians often focus on the grandeur of reconstruction, on how the city rose from the ashes, but rarely do they turn their attention to the forgotten souls who didn't have the chance to rebuild. You think of the streets filled with families who had nowhere to go, no wealth to fall back on, no houses to return to. What happened to them? Were they buried in mass graves, or did their bodies simply become part of the rubble, consumed by the fire? Some historians argue that these nameless victims are simply statistics, numbers that don't have a face or a story. But you know better. You know that these were people, real lives, and they deserve to be remembered. You pause for a moment, standing in the midst of the city's rebirth, and it strikes you how many of these names are lost forever. The people who perished in the fire, whose lives were wiped away without a trace. It's a haunting thought. Entire families, entire communities, wiped off the face of the earth in a matter of days. What happens to the stories of those who never made it out? You wish you could remember them, but the city doesn't allow for that. The survivors rebuild, but they can't rebuild the past. The names of those who died in the fire will never be spoken, their memories lost to the flames. And in the end, that might be the greatest tragedy of all. Not the fire itself, but the erasure of those who perished in it. The city is starting to take shape again. The walls are going up, the streets are being paved, and the sounds of hammers and chisels fill the air as construction crews work tirelessly to restore London to its former glory. But there's something unsettling about it all. Amidst the rubble, amidst the dust and the grime, you realize something. The city that's being rebuilt isn't the same city that once existed. It's not just the physical scars. It's something deeper. A divide is emerging, one that will linger long after the flames have died. The wealthy, those who manage to escape, have the means to rebuild quickly. They've retreated to their estates, far from the devastation, while the poor, the ones who were left to burn, are left to pick through the wreckage. Those who had the luxury of fleeing are now turning a blind eye to the ones who didn't. They rebuild with ease, but the emotional divide between them and the ones who stayed behind grows ever more apparent. The city, as you now see it, is a city of two worlds. On one hand, you have the powerful and the privileged moving forward with their lives, their wealth intact, their homes rebuilt. On the other hand, you have the poor and the displaced, left to fight for scraps, to survive in a world that no longer seems to care for them. The flames didn't just consume buildings, they consumed the very fabric of society. They exposed the gulf between the haves and the have-nots in ways that no one could ignore. You walk through the streets, and it's impossible not to notice the contrast. The rich are rebuilding their mansions in the West, while the poor are left to scramble for whatever's left in the eastern districts. The rich will live on, secure in their knowledge that their status, their wealth, will ensure they're never really affected by this disaster. They're untouched, immune to the pain that grips the people who had nothing to begin with. Historians often debate whether the fire's aftermath deepened London's class divide, or whether it served as a turning point, a chance for societal reform. Some believe the fire exposed the inequalities of the time, while others argue that it simply accelerated the trend of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. The truth lies somewhere in between. Yes, the city rebuilds, but it does so with the knowledge that nothing, not even tragedy, can erase the deep, underlying divide between the classes. You begin to wonder, as you look around at the city's new face, if this divide is what will truly define the legacy of the Great Fire. The physical scars may heal with time, but the emotional and social wounds will remain, buried beneath the layers of brick and stone. The city is not just rising from the ashes, it's dividing further. And in the end, perhaps that is the fire's greatest lasting impact, not just the destruction, but the division it carved into the very heart of London. Time passes, and the fire becomes a memory, a historical event. But for those who lived through it, for the survivors, it's a memory that will never fade. The city may be rebuilding, the streets may be changing, but the fire lingers in ways that can't be fixed with bricks and mortar. The legacy of the Great Fire isn't just the destruction of a city, it's the emotional aftermath, the lingering trauma that shapes every stone laid in the reconstruction. As you walk through the newly rebuilt parts of London, you can't shake the feeling that something is missing. The fire has taken more than just buildings. It has taken something intangible, something irreplaceable. The city has changed, but in a way that goes beyond architecture. It's changed in its very soul. You see the new structures rising, sure, but they feel hollow, as though they're built on the ashes of something much more profound. The laughter and chatter of everyday life seem muted, distant. The pulse of the city has been dulled. The fire has left a permanent scar on the people, even those who weren't directly affected, who didn't lose their homes or their loved ones, still carry the weight of it. It's a collective trauma, one that can't be erased, no matter how much the city tries to move on. You notice it in the way people walk, with a certain hesitance, a certain wariness, as though they're always waiting for the next disaster. They've lived through the unthinkable, and that changes you. It leaves a mark, and some marks, no matter how much you try, don't ever fade. The rebuilding efforts were swift, efficient even. But how do you rebuild a city's spirit? How do you fix the cracks in the very foundation of a people's psyche? You start to realize that this isn't just about rebuilding structures. It's about rebuilding trust, faith, and the sense of safety that once existed in the hearts of Londoners. The city may look the same on the surface, but it's different now, and perhaps it always will be. Historians argue whether the Great Fire was the catalyst for modernizing London or if it simply set the stage for further tragedies. Some say the fire forced the city to rethink its infrastructure, its layout, its safety measures. Others argue that it only accelerated the inevitable, that London was always destined for a transformation, and the fire was just the spark that ignited it. Either way, you realize that the fire's true legacy isn't just in the ashes, it's in the changes it forced upon the people and the city. And so, London rises from the ashes, but the people rise with it, forever changed by the flames that consumed their world. The fire will be remembered, of course, but in time, it will become a part of history, a distant memory. The question, though, is whether the people who survived it will ever truly forget. Can you ever forget something like this? Something so life-altering, so world-shaking? The fire may burn itself out, but the emotional residue lingers. And that is a legacy that no stone wall can ever truly erase. The days pass slowly after the fire. The air, once thick with smoke, clears just enough to let the survivors breathe, but it doesn't feel like a relief. There's no real breath of fresh air. The trauma that clings to the city lingers, as if the flames have scarred more than just the landscape. The memories of what you've seen, the screams of people running, the sight of entire homes swallowed by fire, are etched in your mind. You can't forget, no matter how much time passes. Even as the city begins to rebuild, the past is always there, hovering like a shadow. You try to focus on the newness around you, the fresh walls going up, the sound of hammers in the distance. There's an effort to move forward, to put the fire behind you, but it's hard. It's impossible to ignore the faces of the people who didn't make it out. You can still hear their cries in the back of your mind, their desperate pleas for help that were drowned by the roar of the flames. You'll never forget the heat, the suffocating smoke that burned your lungs, the helplessness that filled the air like a thick, choking fog. What's worse than the fire itself isn't the flames, but what it leaves behind. The psychological toll, the emotional damage, is something that can't be rebuilt with bricks. People, families, entire communities were wiped out, and the survivors are left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. But how do you rebuild a life after witnessing such destruction? How do you heal when you've seen everything you love go up in flames? The trauma of survival is something no one talks about. Survivor's guilt is a heavy burden, a feeling that claws at your insides. You feel it like a weight pressing down on your chest. Why you? Why did you make it out? Why did some escape and others perish in the blaze? Some people can never escape the psychological scars left by such an event. Historians still argue whether the emotional trauma from events like this is worse than the physical destruction. They debate whether the city's recovery can be truly measured in physical terms alone. But you know it's different. The fire may be gone, but the scars are permanent. It's not just the people who died that haunt you. It's the ones who lived, the ones who will never be the same again. The faces of the survivors are empty, hollow, as if they're all walking ghosts, trapped in a city that has changed beyond recognition. They try to rebuild their homes, but there's nothing that can rebuild their souls. The question lingers in your mind. Can a city really recover from something like this? Can a people ever fully heal from such a catastrophic event? Or is this just the beginning of a long, painful road toward healing? One that will take decades, if not centuries, to traverse. You walk through the city as it rebuilds itself, but there's something unsettling about the way the bricks fit together. They seem too neat, too perfect. It's as though the city is pretending that the past never happened, as though it's trying to erase the memories of the fire, to replace them with something safer, something that doesn't hurt as much. But the ghosts remain. It's not as if the fire has left the physical city untouched. It has. The walls, the buildings, the streets all rise again from the ashes. But something intangible lingers in the air. There's an undeniable presence here, one that can't be seen or touched, but can be felt in the weight of the silence. As you walk, the shadows seem to stretch longer than they should, and the air is heavy with a sadness that never quite lifts. The city has changed, yes, but it will never be the same. You feel it deep in your bones. The memory of the fire hasn't gone away, not for you, and not for anyone else. You can almost hear the crackling of the flames in the distance, even though the fire is long gone. The ghosts of the past walk alongside you. You see them in the vacant eyes of the survivors, the ones who wander the streets aimlessly, still lost in the aftermath. You hear them in the whispers of those who lost everything, the ones who can't even look at the new buildings because they're a painful reminder of everything they've lost. The fire didn't just burn their homes, it burned their sense of self. They are the living dead, walking through a city that doesn't understand their grief. Some survivors say they feel the presence of those who died in the fire. They hear voices in the wind, see figures in the smoke, feel a chill on their skin when they pass through the old parts of the city. It's as though the fire didn't take everything. It left a piece of itself behind, a piece that haunts the survivors. These ghosts aren't just memories. They're the echoes of those who couldn't make it out, and they never let you forget what happened. Historians have often spoken about the aftermath of the fire, but few have explored the psychological and spiritual scars it left behind. They focus on the physical rebuilding, the reconstruction of the city, the way London transformed in the wake of such disaster. But those who lived through it, those who were forced to continue living, know that there is no true rebuilding without addressing the ghosts. London may have risen from the ashes, but it has done so with a lingering, hollow grief that cannot be ignored. You know it in the way the survivors look at you, in the way they walk through the streets, in the way they never seem to truly be present. They're here, but they're not really here. They're still stuck in the fire, still trapped in that moment when the world they knew was torn apart. They are the ghosts now. As the days stretch on, you find yourself standing at the edge of the city, looking out at what's been rebuilt. The horizon is filled with new structures, tall, strong, unyielding. Yet, for all the progress, there's a gnawing emptiness inside you, a sense that no matter how much the city changes, something vital has been lost. London is no longer the city it was before the fire. It has risen from the ashes, but it has done so without its heart. You wonder about your own survival. You made it out. You're standing here, breathing, watching as the city picks itself up. But did you really survive? What does survival even mean when the world you knew is gone? You weren't just spared from the flames. You were left to live with the weight of the destruction, to carry the burden of everything that was lost. Is that survival, or is it just another form of suffering? The question lingers. What would have happened if you hadn't made it out? Would it have been easier to simply vanish with everything else? Would it have been better to let the flames take you? to be one of the nameless victims whose stories were lost forever in the fire? As you stand there, watching the new city rise around you, you realize the cost of survival. You're here, but you're not the same. How could you be? You've seen too much, felt too much, and now you live with the burden of having witnessed the destruction of everything you once held dear. The weight of that knowledge is heavier than any brick or stone. Historians and survivors alike wrestle with the question of survival after such a tragedy. Is it a triumph or is it a curse? Some say that surviving means carrying on, rebuilding, and continuing to live despite the odds. Others argue that survival after something like this means being forced to live with the trauma, the loss, and the never-ending question of why you were spared when so many others weren't. For those who made it out, survival is often not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a different kind of suffering. The suffering of memory, of guilt, and of living in a world that has been irreparably changed. As you think about the survivors, the ones who made it through, you realize that survival comes with its own kind of responsibility. You live, and you carry the weight of the fire with you. You carry the names of those who didn't make it out. You carry the lives that were lost, the futures that were never realized. The fire may have consumed the city, but it didn't consume your memories. And in that, survival is more complicated than you ever thought. And so, as the city rebuilds itself around you, you find yourself at a crossroads. The fire is over. The flames have died down. The ashes have settled. London is rising again. But what of the survivors? What of you? Can you truly rebuild a life after something like this? Or will you forever be defined by the flames? The question is one you'll carry for the rest of your days. You take one last look at the city, at the skyline that seems to stretch endlessly before you. It's different now, but it's still here, and you're still here. The fire may have taken much, but it didn't take everything. It didn't take your ability to keep going, and perhaps that